Coming up today, on the eve of the return of Riq Woolen to the Seahawks defensive secondary on Monday night against the Texans, we'll examine his present and we'll examine his potential future. He's a polarizing figure for certain. We'll take a look at his progression over the last couple of years, maybe some of the contributing factors as to why he has fallen out of favor, certainly with fans. Has he fallen out of favor with Mike Macdonald? Will he be in the starting lineup on Monday? And what does his future hold with the trade deadline just 2 weeks away and free agency looming at the end of the season? We'll look into all that today on Seahawks Forever.
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
I want to remind all of you that there is still time to get in on the Red Hot Sales event from Omaha Steaks, USDA certified steaks delivered to your door. These have been a staple of the Viens family since I was a kid. They've been in business since 1917. And right now, they're going to give you 50% off plus an additional $35 off for being a viewer, a fan of this program if you use the promo code FOREVER. So go to omahasteaks.com, use the promo code FOREVER. They're going to give you 50% off plus an additional $35. Let's take care of this as well. Sleeper's still running this great promotion. If you haven't signed up, if you haven't taken advantage of it, if you haven't looked into their games of skill or even their fantasy football, their pick'em league like we do here on Seahawks Forever, or even their live play-by-play real-time reaction during games where you can interact with each and every play in the community that's out there, well, they're just going to give you a free $20 to get signed up. That's how you can get started. Now, if you do want to get involved a little bit more than that, they're going to match your first deposit up to $100, 100%, if you use, again, that promo code FOREVER. Check out the Sleeper app today. All right, you guys. Again, let me start off by saying a couple of things. Number one, I apologize again for last night. I was really excited about the Ask Coach Bryce segment with Bryce Coots and had it all set up and had all of your questions that you'd submitted during the week all queued up and ready to go. And we were going to do it live. And so that would bring even more questions in. Thought it was a great way to take advantage of the Mariners off night in the ALCS as they now get ready to play Game 6 tonight in Toronto. And had some sort of catastrophic internet outage here locally with shout out to Optimum Internet. Thankfully could download so I could watch, I could stream, but I couldn't. Upload speeds were almost non-existent. And I just kept I tried. We kept pushing it back. I kept running speed tests and there was absolutely no way. Literally couldn't even load StreamYard, my website that I use, the streaming service. So by about midnight Eastern time last night, it seemed to bounce back. So they corrected it, but then it was too late and things look good enough today. So at least I could upload an episode. We will revisit that next week. And certainly with the bye coming up next week, we're going to have a lot of visits from some old friends doing some mid-season check-ins. Also really excited about this. Look ahead next Friday. Just a little teaser for you draft nerds. I know it's early, but it is halfway through the season and the college football season as well. And we're starting to get an idea of what the draft class looks like. So Justin Milo from the Draft Network is going to join me. We're going to do a live 3-round mock draft on their simulator. He's going to walk through, make the picks for us, explain why he thinks those picks make sense. So if you want to nerd out a little bit, if you haven't gotten your draft fix, tune in later this week. Lots of other fun stuff coming up, as well as a major announcement to some changes to the Patreon page that it's going to benefit all of you. Really excited about that. And stay tuned for news on that. I'll announce that shortly after the ALCS wraps up. try to squeeze it in there when there's no baseball. Also, probably noticed the shirt I'm wearing. Just it's been a week for yours truly. Got some family health issues going on that are a little worrisome. And then when your heroes start to die, rest in peace, Ace Frehley. I was a huge Kiss fan. If you watched my episode with Bob Condotta a couple of years ago, we nerded out on the fact that we were at the same Kiss concert back in 1978. That was my first concert ever, 13 years old. My second concert, 14 years old the next year at what is now called Climate Pledge Arena. was called Seattle Center Coliseum back then. They were in their heyday. They were the coolest thing ever. And I told this story on Twitter, but I'll just tell it again briefly. Humor me. Sorry, if you want to fast forward, certainly you can. And I'll put chapters on this one as well, so you can just get right to the good stuff if you only want to focus on football. But I was 13 years old, and it was Christmas. And my parents, who I love my parents, but they were terrible gift givers. Always were, kind of always have been. They gave my older sister Kiss Destroyer the year it came out. She hated it. She didn't like that kind of music, immediately opened it and said, "This is dumb." Like, she was pretty outspoken. I saw the cover, that iconic painting, and said, "I want it." Became a rock and roll fan from that moment. That's the reason to this day I still listen to that kind of music and prefer hard melodic rock and like big concerts and rock shows. And I was fortunate enough to see them in their heyday, and then kind of at the midpoint of their career. And then I was really, really glad that I ended up going to see them on the end of the road tour in Seattle. Just a couple of shows left ever for them near the end of that tour. Ace, of course, wasn't involved then, but at least I was able to honor them. And I always thought I was a Paul Stanley guy because I wanted to be a lead singer, like when I was younger. But the older I got, the more I realized that Ace was my favorite. Like, he was the heart and soul of that band. Came up with most of those riffs, and wasn't the fastest or the most technically proficient guitar player of all time. But as I wrote on Twitter, played with his balls and played from the heart, played with his soul. And you can see in the outpouring of support from other guitar players how important he was and how influential he was. And I'm glad that he's getting his due now as he's passed on. It was a real bummer. So I just wanted to share that. And now let's move forward. Let's talk about some football stuff, right? So I've prepared some things for you, right? Riq Woolen is, we can call him a polarizing figure. When he was a 5th-round draft pick out of UTSA, he just looked like one of those John Schneider, Pete Carroll day 3 finds. He had everything you look for in a Pete Carroll type corner. 6'4", 4'2", 740, long arms. In many ways, he was Richard Sherman on steroids, faster than Rich. Had a similar profile to Richard. Started out in college as a receiver, converted to cornerback. And then he had the huge rookie year where it just looked like he was a natural, and that even though we knew he was still raw, and that things could continue to get better, like, we were able to see that. He was able to earn a starting spot as a rookie, intercept 5 balls. Was it 5? I think it was 5. He looked instinctive. He just looked like a natural. And we got so excited about it because, well, he's going to get better than this, right? There were conversations. Who's better, him or Sauce Gardner? Like, how much money is this guy going to cost us in the future? And then we saw a gradual decline in his performance. His second year ran into some injuries, and whether those were related or not to the next thing I'm going to say, questions about his run defense, his toughness, his ability to come up and hit, his willingness to do it. That never made sense to me, because when I went and watched this college tape, one of the things that stood out to me weren't just the long arms and the press ability and the coverage skills, but he came up and hit guys, flew to the ball, and sacrificed his body. Now, sometimes injuries change guys. We saw Sean Alexander's career ruined by a wrist injury. Like, he just never seemed the same after that. He never seemed as willing as he was prior to the injury to put his shoulder down and get physical, tough yards. So maybe there was something to that with Riq. Although, this year there were moments 2 weeks ago against Tampa where he was coming up before the concussion and getting in the mix. We saw plays like the Jalen Warren, the big long 60+ yard catch in the Steelers game to get him into the red zone, where he hustled all the way from the backside to make that tackle. If he hadn't done that, Steelers probably would have scored. They would have scored on that play. And then a couple of plays later, Derion Kendrick gets the interception in the end zone. It was a huge play in that game. Really contributed to that turnaround. And now he's coming off a concussion. like, I understand those criticisms. I'm not 100% sure that they're all valid, but it plays a big role in the perception of what we think Riq Woolen is today. That perception doesn't always seem to match up with what Mike Macdonald says about Riq Woolen. We'll get into that in just a second. But first, I want to show you this. These are some key numbers to look at from his rookie year until now. So we start at the top, 2022. I've got targets, receptions, yards per catch, his rating against, his passer rating against, and then the PFF grade at the end. And I'll just say this at the top. Like, I know PFF grades have been a bigger controversy even lately than ever. Like, the discussion grows louder and louder about what value they may have or not have, where you have a lot of ex-players and analysts speaking out and saying they shouldn't even put them out because it does inaccurately shape perception sometimes of what a player is. But I put it up there as a measuring, as a guide, just because it's, whether you agree with what PFF does or not, or how they do it, it's the same service using the same grading scale and the same evaluation techniques over 4 years. And so it can sometimes show trends. So you see the target and reception numbers pretty consistent, and even passer rating against, like, nothing, he never came close to matching his rookie year. But those numbers in 2023 and 2024 are good enough, certainly, to get by with, and numbers that probably are going to get you paid. And we're going to talk about the financial aspect of this too. You know, a 72.1 rating against, that's really good. There's going to be a lot of focus on Derek Stingley Jr. tomorrow night in the matchup with the Texans, and how he's considered one of the top 2 corners in the league by most, right up there with Surtain. And his passer rating against right now is right about 72. That just kind of gives you an idea of the range we're talking about. That's like elite level range. And then his PFF grade was 74.2. His second year, passer rating against 81, PFF grade 75. Last year, passer rating against 83.7. His PFF grade drops almost 10 points. And these are, by the way, I should qualify this. I only am showing you their coverage grades. So run defense, not a part of this. Tackling, not a part of this. But you see the consistency in the target rate and receptions. His rookie year, 42 catches on 76 targets. His second year, 41 on 66. Last year, 37 on 67. This year, 13 catches on 18 targets, 14.1 yards per catch, a 123.1 passer rating against, and a PFF grade of 41.1. Now, if you extrapolate those numbers out and you account for the game that he missed, so you go on per game numbers and you prorate it out over 16 games, assuming he plays the rest of the year, puts him at 42 catches allowed. Now, that's right in there. So you think, okay, that's about what we're used to getting from him, but on significantly fewer targets. The math works out to about 57 targets, which would be 9 fewer than he's ever been targeted. And yet the number of catches would be about the same. So that just kind of brings us to where we are today, right? And then I want to go to Mike Macdonald yesterday in his press conference, when we found out, first of all, it was confirmed that he is going to play on Monday. He's out of the concussion protocol. He is ready to go. Also sounds like we might see both Devon Witherspoon and Julian Love, which means that for the first time since the first half of the first game this season, they're going to be able to roll out the secondary that they intended and wanted to roll out. Now, Love seemed a little less certain because he didn't practice in full, but when asked if any of those guys were going to have to make it through pregame workouts in order for the decision to be made on whether they'll play or not, Macdonald simply answered no. So to me, that sounds like he's going to play. But this is what Mike Macdonald had to say when asked about how Riq Woolen looked in practice yesterday.
I'll tell you what, Riq's had a great week of practice. Told him yesterday I'm really excited to see him play. So I can't wait to see him go out there and do his thing.
So you watch that. That sounds pretty positive, right? Like Mike Macdonald likes this guy, wants him out there. And even furthermore, this is a quote that Michael Sean Dugar of The Athletic posted. Mike Macdonald on whether Riq Woolen is doing a good job handling public speculation about his future. Quote, yeah, there's no speculation with me. This guy is kicking butt for us. So you think, okay, well, Macdonald loves this guy. We trust Mike Macdonald, right? If he doesn't want a player out there, he's not going to be out there. But Mike Macdonald also, we've seen enough now to know that he has his guys' backs. He also talked in this press conference at length about how Drake Thomas, after sharing the weak side linebacker position with Tyrese Knight for a couple of weeks, almost an equal snap share, is clearly the starter now. Knight only played 2 snaps against the Jaguars. And he talked about how good Thomas is and how he's earned that position. And then he went on to wax philosophically about how great Tyrese Knight is and how great he's doing in practice and doing all the right things and how much they love him. I remember in training camp being there and hearing him go on and on about how great of a pass rusher Tyreek Smith is and how much they wanted to take advantage of that skill set of his. Tyreek Smith released. He is now a Kansas City Chief practice squad player. And so I'm not knocking Mike Macdonald. This is what most coaches do, but we can't jump to any conclusions, any overarching conclusions about how he feels about Riq and what that might mean for his future because of those comments, because it simply might not be his decision. Certainly not all his decision. There is a financial component to this. Riq Woolen's in the last year of his rookie deal. There's a lot of speculation going into this season about whether he would be extended before the season started because he was eligible to be, which I think almost everyone out there, certainly those of you who have interacted with me on the show, agreed with my take, which is let's pump the brakes. Let's see how he does this year before we talk about an extension. And that is obviously what they decided to do. And you might think, well, when you look at the Seahawks salary cap situation, which I'm showing here on the screen, well, they could extend him. You see here, they have currently, as we sit, $21.5 million in cap space. That is 6th in the league. 2026, they're also in that range, 6th or 7th in the league with $79 million available in cap space. So you'd think, and now some of that 21.5 might be used between now and November 4th, the trade deadline, if they make a move for a veteran who's making some money. But let's assume they roll some of that over, let's say $10, $15 million. Now we're talking in the $90 to $95 million range, which when you look at next year and you look at the teams that are kind of ahead of them now and who might also roll some money over, would still probably have them in that top 5 range, maybe as high as 3 when you look at where the other teams stand. And I've always said in the past, cap space isn't always about just black and white numbers, fitting contract numbers into that number and just doing simple subtraction. It gives you flexibility because it's all about structure, right? $90 million is a lot of flexibility. And some of those other contract decisions that we thought were going to be difficult last offseason now appear maybe not to be so much. When you talk about Kobe Bryant, who they approached for a contract extension before the season, he turned him down, probably likely thinking he could make himself some money this season. He's playing well, but does anyone think he's playing at a level that would put him in the top of young safety salaries? Kenneth Walker was questioned heading into the season whether it would make sense to extend him given the young depth of that running back room and kind of some of the perceived frustration that we heard from coaches during training camp of how he just couldn't practice every day and how that lined up with his injury history of not always being available. But now we've seen he's clearly the most talented back in that group and he's the most productive back. I think personally, my opinion on that has shifted. If he can make it through this season healthy, I think it would make sense to extend him, obviously, given the numbers, if they made sense. Derek Hall, I think, has put himself squarely in the conversation of a guy that's a foundational piece of this defense moving forward, someone that needs to be extended this offseason. Boye Mafe is still a question mark. Not to me. I think all he's done is go out and continue to prove that while he's a good rotational part of this pass rush group, he's not a foundational player and not worth paying significant money to. Now, maybe because of that, if he wants to be here and he doesn't get any indications that he's going to be at the top of the young edge rusher market, even we talked about this a lot last offseason when George Karlaftis, Gregory Rousseau got their deals as their second best pass rushers on their own teams of $80 million, $45, $50 million guaranteed. Like, I'm not doing that for Mafe, not in a million years. But maybe he and his representatives will realize that he's not going to get that kind of money. But do you see what I'm getting at? There's more questions now than definitive clarity on some of those players and which ones might get paid. And then you have the rest of the secondary, right? Let's forget about Devon Witherspoon for a minute. I don't think there's any question that when the team decides to extend him, it's going to be for big money. That'll be after next year because they'll certainly pick up his fifth-year option. So that'll be a conversation we'll have in 2026. But Josh Jobe only signed a one-year deal. Derion Kendrick is here on a one-year deal as well. Like, they have to make decisions about those guys. You get into the offseason and you want to give Jobe a long-term contract? You want to give Derion Kendrick a long-term contract? Or maybe Kendrick gets the Josh Jobe treatment, gets another one-year deal next year? Well, that plays a role. And then there's this. If you let Riq Woolen hit free agency, teams pay for upside. And a guy that's in his mid-20s, who's been a full-time starter, who has those traits. Teams fall in love with traits. They bank on those traits. This is what the best young corners in the league are making. Sauce Gardner, $30 million a year. Derek Stingley Jr., $30. J.C. Horn, $25. Jalen Ramsey, older guy, obviously $24.1. But Deron Bland, 26 years old, $22.5. AJ Terrell, 27 years old, $20.2. Denzel Ward, 28 years old, $20.1. Marlon Humphrey, $19.5. Trevon Diggs, $19.4. Some of the newer contracts, right? We saw Diamador Lenore sign for $18, basically $18 million a year. Christian Benford at $17.2 at the age of 25 last year. All it takes, if you think, well, maybe we'll let him get to the market, and if he doesn't see what he's looking for, maybe the Seahawks can bring him back at a deal that makes sense for them. All it takes is one team desperate for talent at corner, and we don't know quite yet how good the corner class is in this upcoming draft. From everything I've read and heard, it doesn't appear to be very top-heavy or full of blue chippers. Some team might think, hey, let's throw $18 million a year at him and see if we can get the best out of him. Because there is some speculation that one of the things that's plaguing him now is that it's just not the right fit. Coach Derek from All 22 Films, who was on the show a few weeks ago, breaking down kind of how the secondary looks in Seattle and how they're employing them and tying them together with the pass rush up front. He had a lot of good things to say about Josh Jobe in that breakdown. He did another breakdown on his channel that I urge you to check out, and I'll even put the link down below, where it was all about just Riq Woolen and comparing him to things that he saw on tape from him in previous years. And one of the things he talked about is his footwork and his technique and how he doesn't feel as good about where he is now as he did then. Then he makes mistakes with positioning and placement, and he gets out leveraged. And it's a footwork issue, and that the footwork that Pete Carroll employs and teaches, right, with the what's it called, the drop step or the kick step, it's different than what Mike Macdonald and his staff teaches. And maybe it's just not a fit, or maybe it can be, but he's still just caught in between muscle memory, and he's really still struggling to kind of pick that up. Which, if you're looking for something to grasp onto, something positive, maybe the way that Macdonald talks about how he's doing. And remember, he started talking about the process a few weeks ago when Riq had his struggles early in the season, obviously what happened week 1 against the Niners, and he would be asked on a weekly basis about his progress. And he would talk about the process. It's all about the process with Riq. Well, that he might be referring to technique there. He's not going to say that because he doesn't want teams to pick on that or look for that any harder than they already do when they watch tape. But I just wonder how much of a part of it that is. Now, what do you all think might happen, or what do you think, or what do you want to happen? Well, I ran a couple of polls on the different platforms. On Twitter, gave 3 choices. Does he get traded by the deadline? Does he finish the year and then walk in free agency, or does he get signed to an extension? Not necessarily during the season, but before free agency hits next year. Pretty consistent results. 60% of you on Twitter think he finishes out the year and then walks in free agency. 27% think he's traded by the deadline. This is from Patreon, much smaller sample size. 50% of you think he's traded before the deadline. 33% thinks he finishes the year and then walks in free agency. And then on YouTube, about the same as Twitter, bigger sample size. He's traded by the deadline, 17%. 72% of you think he finishes the year and departs in free agency. Consistent throughout all 3 of these polls is that a very small percentage of you think that he gets signed to an extension. Interesting. I will say this. If the reason that many of you chose he finishes the year, then departs in free agency, and I know that this is on some of your minds because some of you have reached out to me and when we've talked about this on Twitter, is, well, let him walk and get a 3rd round comp pick because some team's going to pay him enough to get that. To which it's an annual exercise where I have to remind people of how comp picks work. First of all, you don't get that pick until the following year. And so they wouldn't be able to recoup that until 2027. So even for the sake of argument, if it's a 3rd round pick, they always say that a year later has 1 round less of value. So it's really the value of a 4th rounder in 2026, if that makes sense. But the other part of that is if the Seahawks haven't played the comp pick game in quite a while, it used to be a big priority. John Schneider used to purposely sign middling veteran free agents that were released by their teams because they didn't factor into the comp pick formula because he wanted to get comp picks. At least that's how it appeared. But you only get comp picks if you lose more good free agents than you sign. And with that kind of cap space available to them, and with such a young roster, and we've seen the value of a couple of well-placed veterans who still have something left in the tank and something to offer in the locker room and in leadership qualities, in Cooper Kupp and DeMarcus Lawrence. And a team that by the end of this year, I think we all might agree is cresting and on the verge. This very well could be a team with another good offseason that's talked about as a preseason contender next year. That I think with that kind of cap flexibility and with the young guys, as I said earlier, that are up for extensions that aren't certainties, aren't sure things, not as much as we thought they were maybe a year ago or thought they were going to be. Some of that cap space might be used to pursue an impact veteran or 2 and fill some spots there. Let's say, for example, they want to improve, they want to upgrade over Anthony Bradford at right guard. Rather than draft another player and add it to an already young group, they might go get a solid veteran. I could see that in the linebacker market because it's so hit and miss these days with linebackers coming out of the college ranks. They're just not prepared to play the pro game. It's different. And so maybe they go with a veteran, someone that's more of a sure thing. Maybe even invest some significant money there because it's so important to Mike Macdonald and his scheme that they might not be eligible for a comp pick. And so my point is this, you don't let a guy walk banking on that. Well, we'll get a 3rd rounder because you might not. So just something to keep in mind. I think we might get some hints tomorrow night on where Riq Woolen stands. As I said, this is the first time since the first game of the first half of the first game that the entire secondary is going to be out there as they intended it to be. And now Derion Kendrick is part of that. And so, when Riq struggled earlier, we saw a couple of instances of Josh Jobe starting when Devon Witherspoon was out there against Arizona. Witherspoon, Jobe on the outside, Mnawari in the slot, Riq rotating in. Are we going to see that again? Or is Riq going to start? Jobe has had his struggles at times the last couple of weeks, right? Now we're going to see, the third game now for Mnawari, and he's presumably 100% healthy. That role that they had intended for him, we're going to see that executed. We've never seen how they would display all four of those guys, or five when you include Mnawari, with Kendrick, Jobe, Riq, and Spoon together. So it should be a good opportunity for him to make a statement, because I do think with that Houston offensive line, who has struggled, really young. Remember, they remade that whole line in the offseason and traded away Laramie Tunsil, and they're starting Ariante Ursary at left tackle, and they're young across the board. In fact, broke this down just the other day with Paul Gallant. If you haven't watched that preview episode, check it out. Paul was great, former 710 Seattle sports host, and has spent the rest of his career in Houston. And so he's there now, and he knows that team well. They're exactly the same age on average from left to right as the Seahawks, 24.4 years of age. And the numbers show it. Their pass block win rate numbers place them in the bottom 5 in the league. Against the Seahawks pass rush, that's top 5 in the league. They should be able to take advantage of that in similar fashion to what they did against Jacksonville last week, which just makes things easier on the back end for those guys. They don't have to cover as long. So it should be an interesting opportunity for Riq. They got Nico Collins, they got Dalton Schultz inside, and then the rest of their wide receiver group really young. Christian Kirk is out for this game, so they may have to rely a little bit more heavily on Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel, the 2 rookies that they drafted out of Iowa State. So a good opportunity for Riq to make a statement this week. And then with the trade deadline looming 16 days later, this could be Riq's best chance to reestablish himself for now. And then if he's still on the roster after November 4th, based on Mike Macdonald's comments, his future in Seattle still very much a mystery. What do you think? I know some of you might have voted in the poll already, but let's articulate it down below in the comments. What do you see as the best case scenario for Riq Woolen and the Seahawks? Get as detailed as you want. Best case scenario. For now, and I've been saying this for the last couple of weeks, I don't want to trade him by the 4th of November, because we haven't seen the rest of the group be healthy and play together. We don't know how that's going to look. And until that happens, I would much rather, even if tomorrow night they roll out Spoon, Jobe, Mnawari, Kendrick, and Riq just rotates in certain situations, I'd feel better about that. I'd feel much better about Riq Woolen being your 4th corner than what we've seen from Nehemiah Pritchett. Although I'll continue to pound this drum, coaching staff likes him. He's had some struggles, but there's some upside there. Don't give up on him yet. But I'd feel much better about a team that looks like they have a really good chance to contend, really good chance to challenge for this division. Although, as I record this, the Rams pasted the Jaguars in London today. They look better than ever. It was 28-0 last time I checked, with that game looming week 11. But if they can get this win tomorrow to go to 5-2 going into the bye, all options are on the table for the Seahawks team. I want all hands on deck. I want Riq Woolen to be a part of it. Then they can make decisions in the offseason as they see fit. Follow me on Twitter at Seahawks Forever. If you like what I do, the best way to support the channel is to like it, subscribe, share. All the other ways you can support me are listed and linked down below in the description. Stay tuned for the big announcement about Patreon, and we'll have all that out there in the next week. So stay tuned for that. QR code up here if you just want to buy me a coffee or a beer. In the meantime, once again, rest in peace, Ace. If you're watching this on Sunday and you want a place to watch the Mariner game, by the way, head down to Fast Fashion Brewing on First Avenue in Soto, across from Showbox Soto. They're going to do watch parties for all the games, and they have some of the tastiest beers in Soto. Glad to have them as a partner. Thanks to the Blue Wire Network as well. Thanks to Sleeper. Thanks to you for watching. Forever and always, go Hawks.